everybody. It is April 27th. I'm Jade Johnston with the Buyer Hill Group with Remax Camosa, and I'm here with...
Hi, everybody, and I'm Andrew Plank with Vibe Real Estate Group in Royal LePage.
Vibe.
I just added that, yeah. Gene, that's you're one of the first to know. Hey, yeah. So anyway, hey, April 27th. How did that happen?
Awesome. So what's with the name Vibe?
Yeah, we're just vibing to the name. It's just a good. We felt it was a good name to sort of portray some energy and have a sort of a good connection with. What was the best name we could think of at the time?
Who is we?
Josh Merrick and I. So we've teamed up. He's an agent in our office. He's known as the singing realtor amongst some of our colleagues because he likes to sing about his listings, but he's not been doing that so much. And that's probably, he's a great singer, but it's probably, it's a lot of work. So anyway.
There is a person called the Singing Realtor in Barrie, Ontario. He needs to follow. Yeah, she's a friend of mine.
Excellent.
So awesome. Good for you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, just getting going. But yeah, we just got our first joint listing just went live today, and got another one coming next week and another one probably the week after. So yeah, gonna be getting busy again. It's good.
Good.
Anyway, today we're here to talk about.
Today we're going to do the statistics, and then we're going to talk about sort of the process of the offer process, and then what if a buyer or seller wants to get out of it.
Yeah. So during that arc of a purchase, what happens if either party wants out, and at what time? Depending on when that happens, it might be that there's different circumstances for how that could happen, or if that can happen legally.
Yes.
So we're going to talk through the whole thing.
Okay, so let's get started.
Okay, so stats first. Oh, no? Yes?
Yep, stats first.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll do the first one. It's this is from Monday, April 24th. So we are going to be reporting the Monday stats on Thursday because it's provided by the board, therefore accurate, hopefully. We've had 466 sales to date as of April 24th, compared to 824 for the month of April in 2022. So we are down, but April was a big year last year. New listings are 799, and that's compared to 1,368 in 2022. And active listings are at 2,054, and that's compared to 1,365. So we're up on listings, and
pretty telling actually that half, a little over half of the same, like in a month compared to last year, less than a little over half of the amount of listings from last year went live in the same month. So 1368 from 2022 versus 799, and yet our inventory is up to 2,000 versus the 1,300 from last year, and that really shows us that there's just a dearth. Although last year there was less inventory, there's actually less new listings coming online. So probably the listings that you are seeing, there's more what I would call stale listings to choose from, and so you have to be really more diligent about what you're looking for and choosing from today.
And you need to get out there fast if you like a product. Go now.
Yeah, it's always been that way. It's funny because even in a buyer's market where things move really, really slowly, the good properties, there's still going to be great properties that are going to show up. And if you don't move fast, they're just going to be gone in the blink of an eye. So there's never a time, I think, that you shouldn't be moving quickly.
Right. And if you look at the list to sale ratio here, it's 466 to 799. So basically 450 to 800. So we're over 50%. So what that's telling me is the market's still moving pretty quickly. The absorption rate is pretty fast.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
So so as of April 27th now, so this is the past 7 days from this Thursday, today, we had 253 listings go live. And 185 from the pool of available listings went pending. So they went under contract. 73 properties price decreased. 3 price increases, 2 back on market. 188 properties sold. So interesting to see the 16 expired and 4 withdrawn. So small numbers there, not huge. Still showing us that we do have a vibrant market. That's in a really, really slow market. We're going to see listings coming up and listings not selling, and that number being larger.
You know, maybe what we should do one day is go back and look at 2021, April 2021, and critique our show and just see like, oh my goodness, you know, what we were going through and how it compares to now. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, we can do a retrospective or anyway, go through and pull out bloopers and so forth. That'll be every show though. So anyway.
Okay, so let's talk about the arc of real estate. Andrew and I were discussing yesterday how sometimes now we're finding, even if people are writing unconditional offers, they're trying to get out of it. What does that mean now in today's new rescission period, as well as in the regular offer process?
Yeah.
What happens if a buyer or seller wants to exit?
Yeah. I'd like to talk about the whole span of the real estate journey and what happens if either party, a buyer or seller, gets remorse or decides they want to step away from an agreement, or and depending on what point they are in those agreement parts, what can happen and what the kind of logistics are and where it could kind of go. So we'll start from the very, very beginning and end with an unconditional offer. This is a graphic Jean has. Jean, do you want to explain this graphic really quickly in general?
Yeah, so after we get an accepted offer, so we're negotiating back and forth between the buyer and seller, we do now have, day 0 would be the accepted conditional offer. We usually have 7 to 10 business days to do our due diligence for the buyers. In the first 3 business days, we can rescind the offer with the buyer and a little penalty of 0.0025 of the purchase price goes to the seller directly from the buyer.
0.25%. Yeah.
Yeah, 0.25%. I just do that because some people are bad at math. So anyway, regular conditions are financing inspection, review of the property disclosure, title, getting an insurance quote, which most people forget, and then other investigations. What we as a realtor do is provide people with resources so that they can remove those conditions, and we guide them through the process. We then go unconditional. And once that's happened, that's when the deposit goes in. Generally, sometimes that's changing now with some of the deposit going in upon acceptance. And then usually 1 to 2 months later is when the property is actually sold. We do report on pending sales here in Victoria. The reason is so that we know what the market's doing. And as agents, we can inform our sellers and buyers what the list to sale ratio is and how active things are going, as well as we can tell how many offers and general interest.
It's helpful for us because some closings aren't, for 3 months down the road or more. And so if you don't know what the pending price was at the time of the sale, it's really hard to know in real time what values are. But that's going into the weeds a bit. So let's go back to, I want to talk about this from the very, very start, like the whole arc of this. So even before an offer, maybe there's a listing agreement with a seller. The seller says, I no longer want to sell my home. These are all things that people have these questions. So I want to talk through all of the frequently asked questions of what could happen here.
Okay.
So Jane, so starting with that, there's property on market and seller is looking to sell, but then they've decided they're going to change their mind, but they're under a contract. What recourse do they have?
They would then have to sign a change order form. The form is between the listing realtor and the seller, and it says that they want to change the date, either the expiry date or take it off market. They have a couple of choices: take it off market, change the expiry date, or cancel the listing outright.
Right. And so that's not able to be done unilaterally, though, because there is an agreement signed. So it is a contract. So there is a discussion to be had. And of course, contracts are contracts and they're in writing. I mean, I will often tell my clients, and I am reasonable about this, hey, if things aren't working out, give me an opportunity to fix it. And if it's not working out, then, we will figure out a way to release you from this contract. There is sometimes I've seen some Schedule A's which is an addendum to the listing contract where agents will add in a fee if the contract is expired or canceled before the contracted date. Jane?
Yeah, I was going to say, don't break up with your realtor by text and not when you're drunk.
Yeah. Now, the fact is that if you have a listing and you decided not to sell and the realtor isn't going to let you out of the contract for some reason, which is not really best form, but everybody's got their own business models. You might be getting offers and you may just not want to take them, but there is stipulations also in a listing contract that do state if an offer was to come and met all of your criteria, the commission is deemed owed. Again, the realtor's done work and put your property out on market. So that is something to consider and discuss with your agent when you list a home, is these different scenarios.
And also, I would say it usually comes down to communication. So people generally want to break up with the realtor because something's happened and one or the other party hasn't communicated correctly or accurately or in a timely manner. And that's usually what leads to.
Yeah. It could also be there's a life change that just makes the home unsaleable or some new information has come up. So there's lots of reasons for it, but that's kind of the process. Of course, now buyers aren't, they may be under what's called a buyer's agency contract with their realtor. And that kind of is a going steady between the realtor and that buyer. We won't get into that, but there's also usually a shotgun clause for getting out of that, usually 3 days notice or something like that. But it does have to be put into the contract. It's not set in there automatically. So
once we have a listing and somebody shows interest, we get an offer on the property. Depending on the realtor, let's just say there's one buyer. They have 3 choices. They can accept the offer, they can counter the offer, or they can just ignore the offer. So generally, I would say most people counter. There's terms and conditions. It depends on how much discussion happens between the listing and the buying realtor, especially for dates and stuff. I find that better communication's happening now more than previously when we first started. And so the counter can be on any one of those terms and conditions, as well as price. A lot of people focus just on price, but because there are all these different issues that can be found, financing or inspection, the seller or buyer may counter on those.
Right. It's not always just about price. Dates are a big one. So you're working with a buyer, they ask you to draft an offer, you start to draft the offer, they get cold feet, they walk away, fine, no contract's been submitted, it's fine, they move on to the next property. You get the offer written, you submit it to the listing agent for review, and then your buyer decides to get cold feet for whatever reason and says, no, I don't want to sell, I don't want to buy that property. So that at that point, because it's been sent out, there's one option available to the buyer before it's accepted, and that is to rescind before it's accepted. And
so that just involves the buyer agent sending a text message or an email to the listing agent just telling them they don't want to move forward. So yeah, it has to usually, I believe it has to be in the same form it was sent, but essentially it's so double check on exactly always have to it doesn't happen often, so I always have to revisit how rescission is done. And we're not talking about the rescission during the unconditional contract, the rescission period. So let's not get confused. You're actually rescinding your original offer and before it's been accepted. Now, if you go to text the other agent and the other agent says, accepted, it's in your inbox before you get a chance to do that, then the offer has been accepted and you're no longer in that ability to rescind. So you have to rescind before there's been an acceptance of the offer. Right. Otherwise, you're committed to the process. And I would say as a buyer agent, like you write an email, you text the realtor, you do everything. You touch base. Yeah, you do everything. You essentially throw everything at it to say, I'm rescinding this. And that can go both ways. You could make your offer as a buyer, it goes to the seller. The seller then does a counter offer back to you. You're sitting there considering that offer, thinking you have all the time in the world because it's open till midnight the next day. But in the meantime, that other seller has received an offer. They like it better. It's unconditional. They just want to take it.
But if they just take it and then you accept that counteroffer, they've sold their home twice. So now that seller needs to rescind back before they can accept the offer that they got.
Right, exactly.
So that's the first kind of goalpost for getting out of a contract, or before even a contract is formed. Making sure you don't form that contract is by rescinding. So that's number one. So then let's say you get to the point where the offer is accepted, and depending on whether you're a buyer or a seller, there's going to be different rights of sort of getting out of the contract, you might say. For example, Jane, you know, there's language, you want to talk about the language in the contract for the seller?
No, you can go ahead.
Okay, so acceptance is irrevocable. There's language in the contract that says, I don't have a copy of it here in front of me, but essentially it says, you know, this acceptance is irrevocable, and it's really, it's binding on the seller unless there's a condition in there that protects the seller from something, let's say subject to lawyer approval or something. There's no ability under contract for the seller to get out of the contract. The buyer still has usually their conditions, plus they have this rescission period now of 3 days with that fee. So the buyer has some get out of jail, not essentially free, but some get out of jail kind of options, whereas the seller is usually bound by contract. So the seller couldn't take another offer. For example, if the next day a better offer was to come in after accepting the first offer, and the buyer said, I really like this better, they don't have a way of getting out of that contract unless the contract is flawed itself, get legal advice, or there's a condition in there that protects them, but there usually isn't.
And usually it depends on the realtor, but there is one realtor who always puts subject to seller's lawyer approval, and which always makes the buyer feel a bit sketchy about the whole process. But that's to protect the seller as well as the listing realtor.
Yeah, and honestly, that clause, I mean, I've read lots of different findings and not court cases, but you know, the different realtor punishments. But the legal, you know, we go through that legal update course, and subject to lawyer approval doesn't necessarily mean that the lawyer can advise the client to get out of the contract. They might advise on the contract. It depends on the reason of how they're trying to get out of the contract. They have to use the reason in that they can't just frivolously try to get out of the contract and use the lawyer as an excuse.
Yeah, and so sometimes there may be a clause in there subject to the seller entering into an unconditional contract to purchase a specific property. So if they have a subject to sale offer, what this does is reveals the seller's motivation, but it's important to the seller to not accept an unconditional offer without having a way out if they don't have property to go to.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about rescission before an accepted offer. There's an accepted offer. So in that case, we've got the 3-day right of rescission, which we talked about, and that triggers from the moment of accepted offer. You've got 3 business days. You can pay a 0.25%. Yep.
So what that means is if you have an accepted offer on a Friday night, the rescission period starts Monday. So 3 clear days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So really, in some cases, it can be 5 days, but it's 3 business days.
Yep. Or on a long weekend, even 6. So there you go. So that rescission period does apply, but only from the point of accepted offer. So it's if you had, let's say, a week's worth of conditions, and then you remove your conditions that week, after that week, your rescission period doesn't start then, it's already over. If you do have conditions though, and you decide not to go forward based on something within those conditions, at that point, you still have, you formed a contract with the seller, and the seller is expecting you in good faith to do your due diligence, to do your building inspections, to get your strata docs reviewed, whatever it is that you've got down on your contract. So if you're not doing that work, and then you try to get out of the contract based on your conditions, they might try to hold your feet to the fire. It's hard because there's usually not a deposit in place, but you still have a legal contract. And if the seller won't, if you send a release to the seller and ask them to release the contract, they may choose not to release you. It happens every once in a while.
And this is exactly why you can't write on two properties at the same time, because you can't be have integrity in both offers unless you're planning to buy both properties.
Yeah, I mean, we have seen that happen where an agent isn't released from one contract and they're writing on another. And from one argument, you could say, well, they could be buying both if they wanted to. Technically, it's hard to sell one house twice, but you can certainly, if someone's in a position of being able to buy two houses, they certainly have the legal right to do that. But if it's being done under the intention of really trying to get out of one and onto the other, it's hard. But that release is really to help all parties go back to square one, to where they were at the beginning. And if the release isn't signed, and this can happen, I've had it happen a couple of times in a couple of different scenarios. We can talk about this. If the release isn't signed, then it keeps the seller and the buyer, bound by that contract. So the seller really can't sell to someone else in the meantime. If say the buyer asks for release from the seller and the seller says, no, I'm not going to release you. The seller they're not in the best position either to not release if they know the buyer's not going to go forward, because they can't actually accept another offer from a buyer.
I don't know. Is that true?
Yeah, they shouldn't, because if they haven't released.
I don't know. Is that true though? Are you applying logic or are you applying law?
I'd say get legal advice. And I'm also saying via logic, if you have a contract and it's not released, you're still bound by a contract.
But yeah, I mean, I agree with you that both parties, but recently I had a buyer send a release to a seller, and the listing agent said she didn't see the need for the seller to sign it since all the conditions were for the buyer. But anyway, I have put a note in the file and advised our conveyancing office. What can I do? I can't make somebody do that.
Yeah, essentially, if you're not going to get a release, and we have to advise our clients to get legal advice as to how to proceed. And if they choose to proceed, and the chances are they're not going to be bound to it so I've had a situation where a buyer asked to be released and the seller didn't sign release. And I actually talked to my seller about it and said, if you get another offer and you've got the release signed by the buyer, as long as that release isn't rescinded, you could look at other offers. And then if you got another offer, then sign the release.
Can you rescind a release? I don't think so. You'd have to rewrite an offer.
Release is kind of like I don't know. I'm not sure.
You are like going down a rabbit hole.
Well, let's get lawyer advice on all these things. But the point is that we have this. The reason we have these releases signed is so that we can go back to square one. And if it's not signed, then you're in a legal gray zone, and that's where you need to get lawyers' advice, because someone could choose to ask the courts or talk to lawyers and have the contract enforced to some degree. So, for example,
let's just be careful about what we say here, because we really need to tell people, go to your lawyer.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but don't give advice.
So, for example, if your buyer does a building inspection and they find really the house is super clean, and then they decide they're not going to go forward, but they give the reason of they just don't want to go forward anymore, and they send in a release. The seller could say, you know what, I don't accept that as a reason for release. I'm not going to release you.
Yes, this has happened. True.
I had a client with a building inspection during a building inspection, and they're supposed to be non-invasive, but the inspector had a moisture tester with probes in it, and he poked into the ceiling with it, 2 little holes. But the seller was irate, and actually understandably so, because you're not supposed to do that. I mean, it's still pinpricks, but still. And so when my clients decided not to go forward, she said, I'm not going to sign this release.
Yeah, because they've damaged the house.
Yeah. So I had to pay out of pocket to, help her repaint the ceiling. $100 just to get the release going. But she held their feet to the fire.
Yeah, good. And, you know, if you have an inspector like that, just
Don't use them again.
walk away. Okay,
Many years ago.
so we're really on this. We have a regular offer. We have our due diligence. We find stuff during the inspection. So, for instance, you know, the deck isn't attached to the house. It's likely to fall off,
Yeah.
or there's vermiculite in the attic and we're looking at a $20,000 removal, or we find out a portion of the roof isn't good and it's leaking, etc. We find major costs. And so you're not going to do this for and this by meaning counter offer. So you can go back once you have an
mean negotiation here. You're negotiating after the contract again. You're opening up the contract to this.
Yeah. So what you need to do when you're doing this is be very careful, because you have to use a clause without prejudice clause when you're talking, especially if you're going to have it in writing. And what I do is when I talk to people, I say this is without prejudice, because you don't want it to be binding, but you're asking if the seller will consider to reduce the price based on the findings of the inspection. So often what happens is it's something that the seller wasn't aware of, or if the seller was aware, they didn't disclose it. So it's better to disclose these issues before you go into a listing, or when you go into a listing, so that the buyer's aware, because it's not what they find out, it's when they find it out.
That's important. You know, knowing in advance helps people feel more comfortable, know what they're going into and seeing. This brings up another piece about getting out of contracts. And that is, if someone does try to open up the contract by negotiations, and that's, as you referenced, there's language we can use and ways of approaching it that don't open the contract. Hello? What's going on here? I seem to have lost everyone. Are we still live? Everything seems to have gone. Let's see if I can bring the slides back in. That is not it. Okay. I seem to have lost everything. I'm not sure if we're still live. Oh, there's Jane. Jane, what happened?
I don't know.
You disappeared. Okay. I'm gonna take that. I need your slides back up, please.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. So I was just talking about the fact that if a buyer wants to renegotiate after they've done some due diligence, they have to be really careful, or they could actually damage the contract. The seller could actually get out of the contract, because once you reopen negotiations, you get to the point where you're making essentially as Jane has called it here, a counter offer, despite having an accepted offer. And it doesn't mean that the buyer has the right to get out by making a counter offer, but the seller could, if they deemed it as a counter offer, again, get legal advice. Say, you know what, you're not looking to honor our original agreement. I don't agree to this, and so therefore we don't have a contract.
Yeah. So, and what happens? This happens when, for instance, you find an oil tank in the yard, and it looks like the cleanup is going to be way too expensive, and the seller doesn't want to be bound to it immediately, and in a timeline that's short. And so they may say, okay, I want to get out of this. And so what happened recently, the listing realtor put in a good clause that said, you know, if it's over a certain amount of money, that they're not going to be doing this this cleanup, and it allowed them to be released from the contract. So you can put something in there if you want preemptively to allow the seller to an exit clause based on price.
Okay.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, you mean when your original offer, or when you find the oil tank, or you're anticipating finding your oil tanks, you have that in there already?
Yeah, it was in an oil tank clause. They just added that to the oil tank clause, and I thought that was really smart.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's say we've gotten through all of the due diligence, you've done all your inspections, everybody's satisfied, and then all conditions are now removed. And so either the first offer was unconditional right off the bat, and then 3-day rescission period has been applied, or you've done your due diligence, the 3-day rescission period's long past because your diligence was, let's say, 10 days. But you're now at an unconditional point where you don't have the right to rescind. Deposit's been, there's a small time frame there where deposit hasn't been put in place, and you're still legally bound by contract, and part of that contract stipulates that you're going to bring the deposit. That being said, if you went away to Mexico and never came back to Victoria again, and it's really hard for the sellers to find you, it's going to be hard for them to enforce it, and they really don't have any. They do have recourse; they go to court or what have you, but there's little skin in the game.
What we've learned is if there's a will, there's a way. Like definitely during COVID, there was a will, and so people made things happen.
Mm-hmm.
But if a buyer or seller wants to get out, it's easier for a buyer to get out of the contract, I would say, and walk away and disappear. The seller, however, if they don't want to participate anymore, too bad, so sad, talk to your lawyer. Because and that sounds blunt, but that's happened to me when I first got into real estate, that the seller just all of a sudden decided they didn't want to sell after an offer was unconditional, and we couldn't get them out of it.
This goes all the way back to, and Jane, you were commenting on this a couple of times about legal advice and so forth. Always get legal advice if you're looking to do anything about getting out of the contract. Sometimes the contracts are written in a flawed way. The language of the conditions, I mean, we have boilerplate clauses that are fairly well vetted, but it could be that there was some initials missed. There could be that there was a date that was wrong. There could be some pieces that, depending on how it's argued, again, by the lawyers and the courts, could give someone a reason out. And we read these cases all the time about these sort of situations where an agent or agent's made a mistake, or a clause there's been an error, and there isn't a way out. But generally speaking, a well-written contract doesn't provide that, because what we want is surety and clarity, and everybody is intentionally going to go forward. So we've got a deposit in place, and there's language in the contract about that too now. So if there's language that says time is of the essence, meaning things have to happen in the times that they're stipulated,
Mm-hmm.
and the deposit is kept on account of damages if the buyer doesn't show up on closing day. And that means that the deposit is just kept as damages to the seller.
No, it has to be released from the buyer's brokerage to the seller, to the buyer, to the seller. And the reason why is it's not automatic damages. And how do I know this? I had a buyer flake out, mm-hmm. And so the seller's lawyer asked for the deposit, and we were unable to provide it. He had to go to court to get it.
Okay, so you have to go to court, but still the language in the contract says that the deposit is kept on account of damages, or it's considered damages, not. So in other words, if the seller has suffered a loss, let's say they, because they bought something else in the meantime, and they don't have the money now because they didn't get it from the buyer's agent or from the buyer, or they can't sell their home for the same amount that it was contracted to. If there's damages above and beyond that, then they can still sue for those damages, but the deposit is considered.
So there's going to be two actions that happen. One, so this is why you want a good deposit on the part of the listing, is because a buyer is less likely to forfeit if they have a substantial amount of money deposited in a trust account. They're not just going to walk away. So we often, when I first started, deposits were fairly small, and they got big during COVID, especially with unconditional offers, because we didn't want people just walking away. And so there's that the seller could go for. And then if the seller tries to list again, or the market drops, they can then sue for damages, which is the difference between the first accepted offer price and the second accepted offer price.
Sorry, I'm just trying to find the point in the contract where it says that, but let's just move on. So yeah.
All
Speak
right.
to the lawyer, speak to the lawyer, speak to the lawyer, speak to the lawyer, speak to the lawyer. Talk to
I
your
was
lawyer.
thinking we need to add a caveat at the end of all of these to speak
Yeah.
to the lawyer.
Yeah.
Okay. So have we completed our discussion on this?
I feel complete. Do you feel complete?
Yes.
Do we have any questions?
No. Let's go to the next section of the show. So tell me, what do you have coming up? What's your new
Uh,
today?
Next week, I've got coming up a property in Cordova Bay on Lochside. 50s home, 2 beds on the main, 1 bath, 1 bed, 1 bath down. It's on the upper side of Lochside, so it's got some nice ocean views in the distance. Could use some TLC. Just been lived in by the same folks for many years, but it's a really great home with excellent potential and some wonderful views. And it's a large lot. I can't remember the size of it, but it's a larger lot. It's coming up at 1.2. We just listed a home today. It was Josh's listing. It's on Grafton Street. It's 2 beds, 2 baths, or 3 baths, half duplex for 1,050,000. And it's a stunning, beautiful space. Really big open space in the back with vaulted ceilings for the living room, kitchen space. And then upstairs, really luxurious master bedroom, really beautiful backyard. It's a newer build, and it has 1 ocean glimpse through one of the windows because it's just actually half a block from the ocean. So beautiful space. I've got another half duplex coming up soon on Bay Street with a little nanny suite in the basement. Again, around 2007 built. Yes.
Is that close to Shelburne?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I think I know where that is.
Yeah. So that one's coming up around $1 million point. Still remains to be set, but that's coming up. We've got my other listings. I've got this beautiful property on McKinnon Road on Pender Island. It's a beautiful building lot, but a couple of acres, just under 2 acres, and it's a really wonderful space, and just waiting for a buyer. So,
what's the price on that?
That one is $425.
Okay.
And then I've got coming back on market, and this is one of the things that coming back on market is listing in Minton House on Southgate. So it's a condominium. It's a 55 plus building with
is it pink?
With some services provided. So 1 meal a day, late housekeeping, laundry, that sort of thing. So there's higher fees for something like this, but it's a really low price. It's going to be in the low 2s. We haven't set the price yet on the renewal.
Wow.
Yeah.
I once sold a place in there that was all pink. I had a buyer who wanted a pink condo. Like,
Perfect.
what are the odds?
Yeah.
And I remember the market had just tanked.
Let's go up with a can of paint and some paintbrush.
Anyway, and it ended up, we got 10% under asking, and the board called me and they're like, is this true? The hard thing about those is because the strata fee is very high, is that often a buyer is caught off guard. And so the offer comes in and then this is before people did a lot of due diligence before. Mm-hmm. Anyway, okay, so I have 2 listings coming up. One is in Langford. I'm not going to say what street because I don't have it listed yet. And this is a house with a suite. We're going to be in the 800s because it does have some work that was done on it without a permit. And when you see the listing, you'll understand why. But the house across the street just sold in the upper 900s. So this is going to be a good buy for somebody who wants to do the work. And then I have a beautiful little house. It's 3 bedrooms. And it is 2 bathrooms. It is on Dunsmuir Avenue, and that's going to be, it's a little bungalow, really super cute. They've done an awesome job of upgrading it from floors to ceiling, paint, and it is going to be in the 800s as well. So that's coming up early next week.
Sounds great.
Everybody's interested. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And and I have a buyer in town right now looking for a condo. She's looking in James Bay and Fairfield. and she's looking for something that is dog friendly. So we're looking at everything on the market, and it's all selling. So
She should move into a condominium. I'll paint it pink. It's actually just recently painted.
Okay. Anyway, you guys, so we just want to say, don't forget, if you want to see the show continuously, please like and subscribe us. We are on YouTube. And then you can share it to your friends if you think that there may be something that is of interest to them. Please comment on it as well. And we'd like to hear from you if you want any topic covered in the future. Don't forget, we are also here every Thursday morning at 9:30. And Andrew, we're going to have to change your banner. How do people get in touch? Let me get you here. How do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can reach me directly at 250-360-6106. I'm available. Just give me a call. info@andrewplank.com is my email, and online the website is andrewplank.com.
Do you have a new website?
We don't have a live website yet. No, in fact, we are it's sort of a soft launch. Like, we've formed the team and we have it going, but we're not going deep into it until we know that it's really working.
You're dating before you get married.
We've moved forward from, we're going steady now. Yes.
And if people want to reach me, I'm Jane Johnston. My number is 250-744-0775. You can reach me at brierhillgroup@gmail.com. My website is brierhillgroup.com. I checked it over yesterday, and it's looking pretty good. You can also go to the victoriarealestateshow.com to see this show and more, and information on neighborhoods. And please follow me on Instagram, realtyteacher_remax_Victoria. All righty.
Okay.
Have a great week.
Yeah, you too. I will see you. Still can't do that, right?
Okay. Have a great week, everybody. It's great seeing you, and see you next Thursday at 9:30. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.